Hello, everybody. Welcome to this video where I'm going to be discussing why I think consciousness or awareness is important for others, as well as we can say society. And this idea comes to mind basically because, well, first of all, I want to mention that I have never really spoken about consciousness. I feel like it's a very cliche and vague topic. Like anyone can say, oh, yeah, we need more consciousness in the world, or open your mind, consciousness and awareness and whatever. But I feel like they're very vague terms and they don't really mean anything. It's kind of like all you need is love, right? Like, what does that even mean? From whom, or what are you talking about, right? So it's just things people say, but that lack meaning. But in this case, I'm going to be talking about something I read from the Zodiac and Evolution Psychology book, where it was basically talking about Pisces and how Pisces. See, this is very interesting, and I'm going to share a secret with you, which is I would always ask myself, well, Pisces is known to be kind of like a dreamer, kind of like a lazy person, kind of like this person that's detached from reality, right? Because they are the last sign of the zodiac. And Pisces has been known for this, but in my experience and what I've seen in the world too, I've also seen Pisces that have a lot of energy, that get a lot of things done, that are like very hardworking or dedicated or like very passionate about what they do. Like I'll give you an example, like the actor Bryan Cranston, right, where he basically anything he touches turns to gold, right, with Malcolm in the Middle, with Breaking Bad, and you see him acting in Malcolm in the Middle, and he's probably like one of the top performers in that series, right? Like he's giving it all. He's giving it his all. Yeah, there are many examples like Tony Robbins, for instance, Bad Bunny. I kind of maybe consider him to be in that category too, of like Pisces that uh, basically, like, it's like, where do you get this, energy to do things, right? Anyway, in this book, the Zodiac and Evolution Psychology book, it basically tells you why. It tells you that during your Pisces stage, which is from when you're 26 to 30, or if you are a Pisces, um, you basically have two options. You're inevitably going to be detached from reality. You're going, to a certain extent, they say that Pisces even feel not disrespect towards reality, towards this reality, but they don't take it as serious because they are like otherworldly, right? They know that there's more out there than just this reality. So either way, you're gonna have Pisces that are like just like whatever, right? But there are two types. The first type, I think, is the one that we all know, and the book defines them as regressive. In this case, regressive Pisces are the ones that want to return to like the maternal womb symbolically. Like they go back, right? They work backwards, right? I'm going to describe them in a moment. And the other type of Pisces, which are the ones that I was mentioning, for me are kind of weird, but they exist, are Pisces that are basically focused on evolving, on moving forward, right? Okay, so I'm going to be discussing um, awareness and consciousness because uh, consciousness is basically, well, I'll connect all of this in a moment. First of all, let me differentiate between consciousness and awareness because I think they're two different things, right? And see, the problem is that in Spanish we only use one word for both of these things, which is conciencia. So you could say, like you're walking down the street, be aware, right? And in Spanish, you would say sé consciente, right? And then you could say, you need to make a tough decision, so be conscious, right? Tienes que hacer una decisión fuerte o dura, sé consciente, right? So different things, right? In this case, awareness is only knowing, right? So you're aware that there's someone behind you, or you're aware that a car just pulled up next to you in a red light, right? In traffic, right? So awareness is basically knowing what's going on around you through your visual sense, or through hearing, or through smelling, right? You're aware that there's a bad smell in the air. You're aware that the food is rotten. You're aware that a car is approaching, etc. A person is approaching. You hear steps, right? So that's being aware. A lot of people aren't even aware a lot of the times. Like they'll just kind of like float through life, right? People think that's funny. I don't really think that's funny. I just think that's annoying. It's like, get a grip on life, on this reality. But consciousness is doing with what you know, right? So it's like you're aware that there's a car coming, but you're not conscious if you don't do anything about it, right? Or let's say you're in the middle of the sidewalk, you could be unaware and unconscious, right? And you're just like making people walk around you, right? Because you don't get out of the way, you don't move to the side, you don't keep walking, right? So you're unaware, you're unconscious, but you can also be aware that people are approaching you, but you just don't care. You're not going to do anything about it. You're unconscious, right? So I'm trying to kind of differentiate between the two. Maybe I'm not that exact in my definitions, but for the sake of argument, let's just say that's how it goes, right? Aware is just knowing, and consciousness is knowing what to do with what you sense, right? With what's around you. Consciousness also inevitably implies morality, right? And in this case, I'm going to give you a little analogy where basically awareness is like a security camera, right? So it sees everything that's going on, right? But consciousness is like a security guard, right? So it's like you have the information from the security feed, excuse me, or maybe you even just witnessed something happen, and now you can act on it, right? So we can probably define consciousness as that, all right? Consciousness is knowing what to do. It's being awake. It's being alert. It's taken to an extreme. You can maybe have it be like anxiety, and you could get like very stressed out over all these things that are running through your head. Like, I'm aware of this, I'm aware of that, I'm worried about this, I know this is going to happen. How am I going to solve this issue, this problem? You can have a lot of things like that going on also, and that would be bad. But being aware is like knowing that, and then being conscious is like knowing what to do, right? Like planning. Okay, I got this coming up. I got this going on. I need to do this. I need to go ahead and start moving these pieces of the chessboard, whatever, right? So all of this to basically get to where I want to get, which is semi-conscious, right? So semi-conscious is basically the definition of the Pisceans, or the Pisces people that are in the regressive stage, right? That are working backwards. What does this mean? And I like the definition that the book kind of gives. It's not really a definition, but it explains the two characteristics of semi-conscious people, where you can imagine, like, in this case, maybe they're not even aware, or maybe they're not even, well, obviously they're not fully conscious because they're semi-conscious, right? And here we can get into like what's being semi-conscious, what's being unconscious, and what's being conscious, right? And when I say unconscious, I don't mean the medical definition where you're just like asleep, right? You're unconscious. I mean like being out in the world but not noticing anything, not caring for other people, not caring for yourself, like just whatever, just floating on by, right? It's more of a poetic, exaggerated definition of conscious, unconsciousness, semi-consciousness. But semi-consciousness, these are the two qualities that the book gives us, is basically it equals no purpose or no meaning, and no empathy or no apathy. So let's get into the first one, no meaning or no purpose. So basically, and it makes sense, because in order to think about intention, objectives, purpose, goals in your life, you have to think, you have to be conscious. So if you're conscious, you're able to think about what you want to achieve, right? And when you have goals, you have meaning, you're working towards them, right? Your life is plentiful, you can say. It makes sense. Everything makes sense, right? You're doing things for a reason, right? And you achieve this through consciousness. So if you're semi-conscious or unaware, you don't have this. You don't have purpose. You don't have meaning, right? Like I said, you're just floating on by. Now the part where it says no empathy or even apathy, well, you don't have, if you're not aware, and it makes sense, you're not aware of other people, right? So you don't care about other people, right? You're indifferent, right? Apathy. You're just like, what, like the person that doesn't get out of the way in the and being in the middle of a sidewalk. um yeah, they don't care. They're indifferent to others, right? And this is basically the argument that I'm making, is why consciousness or awareness is important for society. Because if you're not thinking about others, right? That's basically what it comes down to. An example here is when people are driving, right? And they drive, like I've seen people kind of like, they're driving in a lane, and then they'll like, they'll grab a curve, and then like they'll get out of the lane and they'll get into the other lane, just because the curve, you have to have control and consciousness to keep going in that lane. And I've honked to these people, and like I know they're unaware because they immediately jerk back into their lane, right? So you could tell, see, I say unaware, they didn't know, but there are people that are unconscious. When I honk at them, they'll just keep going, they don't care. So that's what I'm saying. They won't do anything with, they already heard that someone honked at them, but they don't care, right? Well, you could say maybe they're listening to loud music, maybe they got headphones on, they're thinking about something, they're distracted. Sure, it could be. But I've seen that a lot, so I could probably infer, or maybe it's likely that they're unconscious, right? They just don't care. They're not going to do anything with the information that was given to them, um, through the honking, right? And yeah, in this case, it also means if you're semi conscious, mystically or symbolically, it means that you want to return to the womb, right? And this is the interesting part, because the womb is like the maternal womb, where you're trying to actually go back to your mother, because you don't want to be, acting out in this life. You don't want to do anything in this life. You're like, reality disgusts you, or if it doesn't disgust you, reality is something that you don't like, right? You maybe don't defy it, but you just don't want to participate in it, right? You're tired, you just want to go back to your mom's, I guess. And that's symbolically what it means, right? Interestingly enough, this also means chaos, right? Disorder. I'm looking at it from an esoteric, symbolic perspective. It's chaos, right? So you prefer chaos, I guess you could say. Now, consciousness, for my third point, consciousness brings us back to the primal or the primitive unity, right? Again, this thing of unity, kind of cliche too. I don't know what it means, but we can say, well, if we're trying to define consciousness, what is consciousness? It is being aware also that there is a bigger grand design and process to all of this, right? And than all of us, right? It's bigger than all of us. So again, that's like knowing that there's a purpose. Even if you say there isn't one, it can feel like there's one, and that's enough to get you through the day, right? Or through your life. So it doesn't matter if it's true or not. In the end, what matters is the process, and that you're living like things matter in the moment, right? And the way to achieve that is through consciousness, right? That's basically what this summarizes. So it's being aware, yeah, that there's a grand design. It's also knowing what to do with being aware, like I mentioned. Ultimately, it's about thinking about the future, right? And in this case, this is where we get the term objective consciousness, right? Where in the regressive side of Pisces, for instance, we have this sort of semi-conscious person that doesn't really care, no purpose, no empathy for others, right? On the other side, we have consciousness, we have awareness, and in this case, you can even almost say it's objective, right? Like there's a reason not only for you, but for everybody, at least, if not otherworldly, but or universal, at least for you and others, there's a reason why you're working towards your goals, right? Like just think of how many smiles, right? Or how many hours of enjoyment Bryan Cranston hasn't brought to the world, right? Through his acting. Or how many people like Tony Robbins hasn't helped, right? Through his actions, through his doing, right? So that's where this is the third time I've said that, but yeah, that's kind of like where this is heading in. Okay, and well, I was gonna talk about the curse of rationalization from Max Weber. I don't know how to really fit that in here, but Weber just basically, well, I think this is for the next video, because in the next video I'm going to get into, no, I think this is for this video. Well, not well, I'll just say it in this video because it's not really for next video. But the curse of rationalization, Max Weber is a sociologist who, along with Durkheim, I think, and Karl Marx, they're like three of the founding fathers of sociology. And basically what he said is that, you know, he said that we live like in an iron cage. But I think what's more interesting about his perspective is like the things that weren't said, or that he hasn't said, which is, or he didn't say, which were basically how like a lot of rationalization will take away all this like enjoyment of life, right? Which in this case, this is even kind of paradoxical to what I'm talking about being aware and conscious and rationalizing your life. So yeah, just a little bit of food for thought there. I'm gonna end the video here before I contradict myself any further. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, so peace.